All right, hello, young scholars. This is Mr. Margaron with your introduction to the Age of Reason, otherwise known as the Enlightenment. So, in your packets, you want to turn to the first page, and we're going to hit kind of the nuts and bolts of Enlightenment, what the Enlightenment is, and we'll take a look at some of the pre-enlightened thinkers. So, you've seen this slide several times. How does this all fit in? So we're just now finishing the end of the Renaissance, and previously before this we studied the age of absolutism and how that all impacted Europe's politics. So the Enlightenment, or the Age of Reason, is going to be the reaction to absolutism. So in the previous classes we talked about the idea of divine right and the absolute right of kings. Now we're going to take a look at natural rights and the idea that government may be a government of the people, may be the best form of government. And then that's going to take us into the Age of Revolutions, where we will examine the American Revolution and French Revolution. And it's important to understand that everything we're going to talk about in this topic, the Age of Reason, really lays the groundwork for what happens in the Age of Revolutions. All right, so what is the Enlightenment? So we know that during the Renaissance, the power of the Catholic Church declined because people were questioning its power. And because of overseas exploration, European empires in Spain and France and England grew more powerful, and we know that was called absolutism. So as the middle class grew economically and financially, the powers of the older empires began to crumble. And what this means quite simply is that as people grew more wealthy, as people began to experience new wealth and new ideas, they began to read and think for themselves, they began to question some of the traditionally held political beliefs of Europe, just like they challenged the traditional religious beliefs of Europe. Like I said, this Renaissance really changed man's view of the world, and it was never the same since. So we're going to look at how the world changed politically with the Enlightenment. Okay, this is again, a direct rebellion against the idea of absolutism. So then you have to ask yourself, well, what role does science play in the Enlightenment? So as scholars began to apply the scientific method to other areas of the natural world, they began applying scientific theories to government and history and economics. It was really neat. They took a scientific approach to these social sciences. And very simply, people believed that human reason and human intellect could solve any problem or unravel any mystery about the world. And that was new. So, for example, if you have Sir Isaac Newton pioneering laws of gravity, if there's a law of gravity, why can't there be a law of equality? If there's laws of physics, why can't there be laws of diversity? If God says, if there's something like divine right, why can't there be something like natural rights? So these are all ideas that come to fruition with the Enlightenment. So just a little background. We talked about these two political thinkers during the Renaissance. I just want to recap these ideas. So Niccolo Machiavelli, we said that success of the state is paramount, meaning it's important, and that a leader will do whatever is necessary to maintain the power over his people. So Machiavelli is going to argue for a strong leader, but not necessarily someone that's going to be hated. René Descartes was the father of modern philosophy. He believed in observation and reason and discovery and truth. Machiavelli argues that the ends justify the means, and that René Descartes said it is necessary to doubt as far as possible all things. And we said his famous quote that he's associated with is, he said, "I think, therefore I am." And we talked a little bit about this in class. He said that I am a thinking thing that thinks, and I can only prove my own existence, which means that I think, therefore I am. So why am I giving you these two political scientists? Why am I giving you these two men? Well, the reality is this. One of these men is more practical, and one of them is more imaginary, if you will. One of them is more analytical, and one of them is more abstract. And the idea that I want you to see is that we're going to be comparing some of these enlightened philosophers in class, including John Locke and Thomas Hobbes, two names that you should become very familiar with. And the idea, quite simply, is this. The idea is what is going to be the best form of government? Is it going to be one that, in the ideal form, is good for everyone? Or is it going to be a government that is practically good for everyone? You know, what is good in theory may not be so good in practice. And that's something that we will be taking a look at, because when we look at these future governments and economies, again, a government and economy that may look good for the people on paper may not be so good for equality. Um, and that's why we're laying the foundation with a little bit of Machiavelli and Rene Descartes. So this was again, a very brief introduction to the Age of Reason. Once we get into class, we are going to dive incredibly deep into the enlightened philosophers of Thomas Hobbes, John Locke. We're going to look at their political differences. We'll be looking at the differences of the philosophies of Baron Montesquieu and Voltaire and Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Mary Wollstonecraft. Really just amazing men and women who change the world because of their thoughts. And I think that's what's most impressive about the Age of Reason. All right, so if you need to watch this video again, just feel free to do so. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can just post a question to me.